There we go. We're live. So how are you doing, Andy? Nice to see you.
Yeah, hi Laura. It's good to be back. Seems like only 2 minutes ago we were last talking.
I know, right? The time seems to be flying like crazy lately. There's definitely not 24 hours in the day anymore. I don't believe it.
I know, it feels like you just go to bed and you don't get like a full night's sleep and you're waking up and then we're off again for another amazing day in the office.
Yeah, exactly. Those are really cool figures you have behind you. What are those?
Yeah, they're my little kind of protective dogs, basically. So these were kind of, I bought them in like an antique place. They're kind of big brass, supposed to
They're
be
beautiful.
2 dogs, dogs of war type thing. So they're supposed to be protective. So their job is to look after me when I'm in the ship, generally.
Yeah, very cool.
Which does happen. Even I have problems. I had a problem on Monday, actually. Last Monday, I've been doing quite a lot of pretty dark things and dark work and that kind of stuff. And then I took my mum, Sunday night, actually, I took my mum out. So she's in a care home. And 4 people had died that week. 4 old ladies had died, basically. So unbeknownst to me at the time, I came home and I didn't know they'd obviously passed. And then about midnight, there was some pretty bad things happening in the house when we were going to bed. And then I had these old ladies come walking in the room, talking to me, and there was a couple of negative things trying to basically take over completely, which kind of freaked Jane out because it's happened a few times, probably in 20 years. I probably had it 2 or 3 times where negative things try to basically push my kind of conscious awareness out and take over completely. So your eyes kind of go black and there's some pretty nasty things that get said generally. So James started to panic and reached out to Jono. So I mean, and that's the thing with this type of thing, you are at risk at times, which is why you need people to have your back. So, obviously Jane asked Jono to check me and clear me, and I was busy making my way back and talking to Chen. So by 1 o'clock in the morning, we'd kind of sorted things out, but Jane had like an hour of panic, really. And of course, Jono was asleep with his phone turned off. So, it's kind of, so we laughed about it because obviously, we clear each other. And it was good that in the morning I just pinged him and said, just give me a quick chat, mate, to make sure things are okay. Because last night was a bit hairy. So, so the world of spirit therapy doesn't come without problems when you deal with the sorts of things we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
That sounds really intense, Andy.
Yeah, not for me actually, because I didn't really know too much about what was happening. But Jane had a bit of a shock. So,
wow.
But ended up well because obviously the 4 old ladies that had passed, we kind of moved them through. Then I effectively took back possession of my own body, which was always nice. At which point Jane calmed down and everything went back to normal. And then Jono just got the message in the morning to perform a quick check.
Wow.
So it's,
we don't realize how susceptible mediums can be to these outside forces, these outside energies that just come pouring in.
Yeah, and as I say, probably for me, I mean, John and I do this every day, all day. So you can imagine the numbers are pretty massive, really, over years. And, quite often we're dealing with some quite high-profile people, Hollywood-level people that have been involved in satanic rituals and practice and all sorts of stuff. So when we are doing things, sometimes it's pretty dark as it can be, really. So you are kind of coming up against adversaries that are quite negative. And 9 times out of 10, it's not a problem, but occasionally something decides that. And of course, if they catch you unaware, it's always when you're not quite, ready for it, or you're not quite protected, or you've been out and you're relaxed and, your guard's down slightly. So the negative things are always kind of waiting in the wings, even to practitioners. And this is one of the reasons, actually, Lara, that, both myself and Jono, when we talked about training people, we wanted to make sure that this is going to be, this is a profession, basically. It's not a kind of hobby that you do occasionally. It's a professional job that professional people do, and therefore you need to be professionally trained, and you need professional backup when things go wrong, because they do go wrong. And ultimately, it's like everything, isn't it? That you come on a training path, a training curve, and for people that kind of collect certificates, SRT work isn't that really, because if you like to do things and enjoy doing things, that's totally fine, obviously. But this type of work, you are coming up against some pretty negative things, and you need to be quite passionate about why you're doing it, and the intention needs to be set and to be good. And if those things are good, then effectively, I mean, if you look at it from a business perspective, if we look at like the in-person course that we're looking for you to come over and do in a few weeks' time, which would be great, the cost of that is 5K. So it seems quite a lot of money. I'm sure a lot of people think it's quite expensive. But if you kind of frame that in the view of this is a kind of career that you're being taught in a week, and what we've learned over 40 years jointly, 20 years each, myself and John Owen, I spent 12 years doing this weekly with Terry and all of his understanding, then effectively for £5,000 you get taught a complete career that you go back and you can set yourself up. And obviously there are like SRT practitioners that charge upwards of £1,000 a clearing. So £5,000 mapped into that is minuscule, really. And obviously, our prices are very low, I think, because we want to make sure we're accessible to everybody, which is kind of why they are quite reasonable. But of course, there are people that charge a lot of money to do the same thing in slightly different ways. So again, if you think about the week that you're coming to, we're going to have a ball basically, because it's going to be like a fab week. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a laugh. You're going to go back with a completely different skill set that you turn up with. Well, hopefully, if we teach you properly, you should do. And also there is the serious part of what we're doing, and we cover that. And the in-person training is obviously very different to doing an online course. The online course is you sat at home reading things and doing things and connecting to us on Zoom. But, it's not the same energy as being in a room together where we're all talking about things and we're practicing and we're teaching. And John and I are doing live displays. And obviously Chen and Whitehawk can come in and have a chat and that kind of thing. So the in-person week is going to be fab, basically. And we've got Ben, the Viral Studios cameraman, coming. So he's going to record what's going on, which is going to be really cool, because then we can have some clips and things for people to watch and people to see. And we can extrapolate that into this is why it's a professional training course, basically, because it's going to be presented in that way. And of course, the guide team are also going to be on hand, and your guides are going to get hooked up with our guides. And so it's not just us in the physical having a ball for a week, really. There is the aspect that the spirit guides are going to be connecting to each other, and Chen's going to be connecting to your guide and explaining how we do things and why we do things. So the spirit guide team gets trained as well. So it's not kind of just the physical, which most people tend to forget, that most spirit guides have skill sets in certain things like we do. But this type of work most of them aren't trained in and aren't really able to do. So this is why once they're hooked up to Chen and his team and Whitehawk and his team, a completely different trajectory of kind of view on the work in that way, really.
Absolutely.
Hopefully,
and honestly, this is more than just a career for some of us. This is a vocation. This is a life mission, because I think this is something I've been training for my whole life. Thinking back on the amount of times that weird shit has happened, and just people, like you said, people just start saying things that are completely out of character. And it takes, your relationship a different path sometimes. And these attachments I don't think anybody gets through life unscathed by them.
No, I think that's a really good point, actually, quite well framed, because from our perspective, if you look at the wider population, everybody has attachments, like every single body. So if you're able to clear those attachments for, a number of people or percentages of people, I mean, Terry worked on like the 80-20 rule. So when we worked over 1,000 cases together, documented and videoed, most of that was 80%, had a tangible, positive result, basically, from the work that we did remotely, unseen, never spoken to, never saw us or spoke to us, apart from Terry. But from my perspective, in terms of doing the work, this is completely blind remote work that's happening. And 20% said they either felt no difference particularly, or some of them reported back they felt worse, or there was a feeling that things weren't quite right. And that's something that we probably need to talk about today, actually. Now we're kind of covering.
We can talk about it now. Aftercare is a big thing I'm working on for you guys. I really am trying to compile all the aftercare people I can, so we can get a community going, and so we can kind of, get people along a process. There's the realization, which is important, which is kind of why I'm here, helping people realize that there is an issue. And once they realize that there is an issue that they can treat rather than just something they're putting up with, a lot of people are signing up for SRT and are experiencing changes, at least. There's changes, whether they're good or bad changes. It's really dependent on the situation, I've learned. So feel free to, share all you know about that, Andy. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, because again, this is a whole kind of an area. Because I mean, from my perspective, the way that myself and Jono certainly view the world is probably quite different to most people, because we're kind of in this spiritual warfare, basically, which is how I see things now. And I used to laugh when Terry used to talk about, because he was ex-forces, so he used to talk about, we're in the trenches and we're kind of doing battle with like the negative side. And Terry's view was very kind of militarized way of talking about things, which wasn't really my kind of capacity and take at the time at all. But obviously over the years, I've come to realize that effectively there is this kind of good versus bad spiritual warfare that is happening on a daily basis, just that the population don't know anything about it. And religion kind of covers it, but it's still been corrupted across different religions, and the wording's been changed and that kind of thing. So religion, at the heart of religion, is good, because it's all about, doing as you would to others, to yourself. The actual teachings are good. It's just that most religions have been corrupted by, people in positions of power over the years. And obviously, governments and that kind of thing use religion as a control mechanism. But religion does tell us that there is this spiritual war that goes on. And in any religion, the wording and the terminology is obviously different, but effectively it's kind of what we see. And that's why, so when we get to do work, if we're looking at the actual work itself, so obviously myself and Jono effectively are just kind of we're the kind of two in-person people that you guys see and talk to, which is nice. But of course, behind the scenes is where the actual real work happens, which isn't done by us at all. And I think we're both pretty clear that we don't do the work. It is being done and orchestrated by a spiritual team that we are grateful to connect to and obviously have that link. So when I perform an SRT clearing, I bring up a name, go through the name, the email address, that kind of thing. So I'm starting to do the physical bit, really, because obviously Chen can't send emails generally. Well, he hasn't really yet. Not to say he wouldn't, but, at the moment...
Hey, Chen, I want to sleep through this. You do the emails this time.
Yeah, or maybe when AI comes in completely, he can just use telepathy to talk to AI and take me out of the loop altogether. But we're obviously the physical kind of representation. So I ask him what he finds. So he scans someone's etheric field, the client that we're working on, and gives me the numbers back. So 1 entity, 2 discarnates, 1 curse, 1 portal. So we just go through the list, basically. And one of the things that hasn't really been covered, I guess, and probably hasn't been said for probably good reasons, is there's a lot more that's going on that we don't talk about in the reports. So I know that, I think I covered this with Daniela Hess. So we were talking about things, and I sort of said to her, quite often we find things that aren't particularly good, but we don't put them in the reports and we don't tell the clients. And the reason we don't do that is because it puts them in a fear state. And if they are in a fearful state, obviously their heart chakra closes, their vibration goes down. So, the actual positive part of the clearing can be negated by the change in their conscious awareness. If we told you that you had, some extraterrestrial entity inside you that had implanted a chip and had done this and that and was controlling your thoughts and your voice box and the things that you hear, that's kind of not a great story, really, for most clients. And if you heard that and you thought, that explains quite a few things about my life or about my family, kind of change, you can't help but go into a fearful, low vibrating state. And of course, this is all about clearing negativity and bringing your vibration up. So, which we're going to cover on the course. So when we do the in-person course, we're going to take you guys through the reality of everything that we do and we see that we don't talk about, basically, behind the scenes. So this is where you get the kind of unadulterated spiritual view of what the guys are actually doing, what they're really seeing, and things are happening that we don't tend to discuss too much in an open forum, if that makes sense. Because like all professions, there's always the bit behind the scenes, isn't there, which is the kind of, people don't need to see this part of it. They just need to be told that they're clear. Everything's clear, they're sovereign, their vibration is starting to rise. And for me, coming back to the question, there's lots of people that have been through lots of pretty traumatic things in their life. So when we perform an SRT clearing, we clear out that level of negativity. But of course, it doesn't fix your life. It doesn't, if you've been abused by people in a physical way, sexual way, emotional way, whatever. It doesn't fix any of those problems at all we do is clear the negative aspect. So for a lot of people, they wake up feeling on top of the world. Some people better than they've ever felt before in their life, which is obviously a great feeling, and that's why we do the work, really. But there are those people that wake up and feel worse, or they feel empty. So if we've removed things that have been encased in your etheric field for a long time, a lot of people feel as though they've lost a part of them, because they have, right? Because something's been taken out of the etheric field that was there, that was controlling, and we've cleared and removed it. So there is a hole, and that hole probably takes about a week to fill. So when things are taken out of the etheric field and cleared, the etheric field has to basically reconfigure itself around you, because it's a magnetic, electromagnetic field that vibrates. So it's going to change and reorganize and reconvene. And obviously there's a lot of emotional things that probably were connected to that part that's been cleared and removed. So you're going to feel it. You're going to feel down, possibly depressed, possibly. There's going to be, a few days of potential negative feelings before everything's clear completely. And then you do wake up and think, you know what? I feel better than I've ever felt, really. And that's the time lag. And for some people, of course, some people have mental health problems because, there is this kind of duality of the way that we work. So people that do have some type of chemical imbalance, which would be considered to be a mental health problem, isn't going to be fixed by SRT. We can clear the negative things, the spiritual things, but the actual chemical imbalances and the mental aspect of it is still going to be there. And this is the part that Terry was really interested to try to document from a scientific perspective, as to kind of how many people have a spiritual problem that we can definitely resolve, and how many people are left feeling like their problems. But when we check in on their sovereignty with the spirit guides, the reply comes back, they're sovereign and they're clear, but they're still either hearing voices, or they're still feeling odd things in their body, or creeping or crawling sensations, etc. And some of those things, from our perspective, can't really be spiritual because they've been cleared. So it does then put you into this, why is the client feeling those things and experiencing those things? And that then pushes you into the more, is this actually a mental health problem that could be treated by psychiatry and psychologists? And this is the big question, really, around this work. And if you talk to any psychiatrists and psychologists, they talk about, most of them realize there are spiritual things that are problematic, and some of them will talk about, if you've been through a terrible childhood and you've been abused and things have happened to you, and you've got dissociated identity disorder, those sorts of things, you've got fragmentation from a mental perspective. Obviously, SRT doesn't really fix that particularly. It just clears negative things. So this is where the conversation becomes a bit more complex. And of course, this is what makes it so interesting from our perspective, because when we perform work on a client, we don't know anything about the person. We don't know what they eat, what they drink, if they do drugs, if they've had terrible traumas, if they've had things done to them, if they've been part of satanic groups. Some people have been involved in demonology and have worked with demonic entities, and then they come to us to be cleared. And, they've kind of given their free will away to demonic entities and been possessed by them in satanic ritual for years. Well, we don't fix that in 5 minutes. It kind of is fixable, but it's fixable over a longer term. And obviously that person has to basically take back their power, and we have to kind of move a lot of the negativity out of their etheric field and their conscious mind and that kind of thing. So there's quite a fascinating story around the whole kind of ritualistic aspect of clearing people that have been involved in satanic practice. And a lot of them haven't actually elected to do it. A lot of them have been used by groups of people to do things like that in. So it's not their own free will to be there. And a lot of them have been children. And then, of course, at some point they end up finding and reaching out to us, and you realise that the case is going to be pretty tricky and difficult, and it's not going to be a one-shot fix.
Right. Absolutely. It reminds me kind of a little bit about Stockholm syndrome, because many of us kind of get attached to our attachments, and then we have that feeling of emptiness and loneliness when we finally been cleared. And I can understand why that would make you feel worse the next day. Yeah. And it also, when you were explaining about the latent issues once you've had clearing, it kind of reminds me of like a ghost limb. It's like when you've had some kind of something amputated, and then you can still feel it afterwards, and you're like, there's something still there, even though I can't feel it. It's like that energetic residue almost.
Yeah,
or
and we
maybe
see
it's
that,
just
right?
in the mind.
So from a spiritual perspective, if I look at someone's etheric field, like if they've had an amputation, we can still see the actual full leg or full arm or full wrist or hand is still there. So the etheric has that vibration still, even though the physical part has been obviously terminated and amputated. So of course, if you were to tickle the end of someone's fingers that doesn't have any fingers because they've been amputated at the wrist, they're still going to have the feeling because it's still coming through the etheric field. Because everything that happens, everything that we feel, happens in the etheric before the physical. But we kind of view this world as a physical world, and we think if we stick a pin in our finger, we kind of like youch and think, youch, that's painful. But if you stick a pin in someone's etheric field using occult practice, they also get a youch and something hurts. But there is no physical
That's
pin.
how voodoo dolls work.
Same concept basically as the kind of voodoo and the Haitian stuff.
Interesting.
So of course, this is how occult practitioners. We're working on the white side clearly because it's positive, but obviously people that are trained to do things on the negative side are obviously working against us, but in the same way. So they know how to affect us and how to send things to people, using negative occult practice, whilst we're trying to block and protect and clear. And our side of the world is that vision. And this is kind of what we come under occasionally. Practitioners working with the sorts of clients we work with. Of course, you know that if you elect to work with a professional client that's sort of VIP level, then they're being targeted by somebody or a group, and it's very clear that target then moves to you because you've elected to help. So kind of it's part of the kind of work and part of the game, really. And this is why also from talking to Jono, again, we talk about things and we kind of share stories, and we're both at the same sharp end of the wedge. But most SRT practitioners don't get involved with much satanic practice and many VIP level people for a long time, because of course the guides keep you away from that to start with, because it's a more complex area to work. So it's only when you've been doing this work for a longer time you start to look at the names of people that come through and you think, wow, president's granddaughter, or some high profile, high level people, and you wonder why they've found you or found us, because obviously the sorts of problems they've got are extreme, and there aren't that many people that work in the extreme end of the scale effectively, which is obviously where we place ourselves.
We have a very unique niche, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I like doing it. The more negative for me, the better. For some reason, I that's my passion, really, which I'm pretty sure is past life stuff.
It's more exciting.
Yeah,
I've always been a bells and whistles type of girl. That's why I joined the fire department when I was on my 16th birthday. I like the excitement.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing as you look at like military guys and veterans and people that choose to do that work. They know that they're cut out to do that type of work if they're in special forces or that type of thing. They're putting their life on the line with the work they choose to do, because they know that that's what gives them the buzz or the feeling or makes them feel alive, and that's why they're there to do it. And I think with SRT, the people that are drawn to do this feel drawn to do it. So you kind of know that it's for you because you've got the right qualities, even though you may not feel you have to start with. But obviously, if you're drawn to do it, then you know that you're going to be lined up to be that person, and it's part of your life path, really.
Honestly, Andy, I think I'm going to be doing this even in death. I'm going to join Chen's team as a soul guide after this.
Well, we probably were before we came in, Laura. That's the funny thing, isn't it?
I had because, yeah, exactly.
You can more or less guarantee that we've all probably been doing this over the other side, and then when we incarnated back into this reality and this version again, that we just...
Does that mean we drew the short straws, Andy?
I see it as a long straw, really, because I like doing
it. Straw. We drew the long straw.
Exactly, and I think that's the other thing about like having fun. When you're dealing with people that are struggling and people that it's like being a GP, isn't it, or a sort of medical doctor. Every person that comes through the door is ill, basically. No one's going to come through and sing to you and tell you how wonderful they feel every day, because that's not your clientele. Your clientele is ill people that have a problem, and that's why they find you. And that's kind of the same as us. We attract people that have some pretty terrible problems and experiences and things. So you've kind of got to keep your vibration up and have fun and laugh, and it's a serious work and serious job. But you have to have that kind of space, that you would compartmentalize your mind. It's serious when you're working, and then when you're not working, you can have a laugh and have a few glasses of wine. Or like I think Louise said yesterday, champagne was her drink of choice, wasn't it?
That was Shelley that said that.
Oh, was it?
In
Okay.
the comments.
Right.
Yeah, Shelley was in the comments being cheeky. It was funny.
Perfect, yeah.
But I haven't drank in months, and I think the only time I'm going to feel comfortable drinking is when I'm around you guys. You can tell me if there's anything creeping.
Yeah, well, again,
The safe, guys. We cleared the space. We can drink now.
And of course, that is what we do. I think it's a trust thing as well, actually, Laura. When, again, you've been doing it a long time, you trust the guides implicitly. So, Monday night for me was a bit of a rocky hour or two, because I knew things weren't particularly good, but I also, knew that Chen would be working behind the scenes to make sure that things get sorted out. So if that was happening to a normal person without Chen and his team behind, you're in a dire consequence place, really, because the next stop is somewhere not great with big sort of foam walls and things. But I'm kind of sat in the space knowing that Chen will sort this shit out, and and we'll come out of it. So, which is what happened.
Yeah. For some of you are just catching on now, Andy had a psychic attack on Monday when he went to an old folk home. And it makes you wonder just how much they're dealing with in these old folk homes, how many are being attacked, there, and being manipulated there, as this is a hot spot. Yeah,
and that's a really good point, actually, Laura. One of the things, I went into the home, actually, because there's probably about 60 people that live in the home, the care home, so lots of dementia clients and patients. So I actually took the staff through like a meditation and just taught them how to protect themselves, and just said, look, before you walk through that door, all you need to do is visualize yourself in a bubble of light, put a thought out to your guides for protection. Like, as a minimum, that will qualify as some level of sort of spiritual protection. But of course, you can increase that by wearing, amulets and pendants and, thinking about your protection and that kind of thing. But effectively, again, 99.9% of care home staff are completely vulnerable to things that they can't see. And of course, everyone that dies in a care home, some of those people don't move on. So they're still wandering around. They're still using the lift. They're still there. And of course, they're going to attach to anyone that comes in. And the staff are there all the time. So, again, same concept as hospitals, really. From our perspective, there should probably be a spiritual kind of consultant, SRT professional.
So it's entirely possible that there are earthbounds and entities that are actually making like Alzheimer's and dementia patients worse in these care homes.
Yeah, so most dementia patients, to be honest, end up with portals. So negative things come through. So I've seen it myself quite a lot of times, where you're talking to someone with dementia and they're lucid, and then they become not lucid, and then their eyes go black, basically, and you can tell. And then they snarl. Quite often they'll snarl at you. And I just laughed. I think, it's just something negative that's popped in to let you know it's, it's there. And then we just basically, I would put a thought to Chen to say, can you clear and remove it? And then the eyes change again and they go back to being normal. But again, most care home patients don't realise it's happening, and the staff don't know what they're dealing with, which is why
I just think you're a difficult patient,
Of course, yeah. And the patients don't, they don't know, do they? Because they've got a fragmented mind, and obviously they've got, potentially negative attachments and things with them. But the staff know that. That's what they see. And normally the family realises as well, because the family realises that, that the parent, they see the change in eye colour, they see the change in emotional state, they see the change in the way they speak to them, they see the snarly face and the anger and the negativity. So it's not your beloved parent that's staring at you. Something else has taken possession for that point in time.
True. Yeah. Obviously, it's probably not in all cases, because some go back to their childhood and their happier time in their lives. But that's clearly something that is part of their plan. Whenever we hypnotize people like this, they always say that it's usually kind of their way of passing on easier. You know what I mean? Making it so that they're happier in this state of mind when they go, versus thinking about all they've lost and dwelling on it.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of people, again, at the end of their life, they're on morphine drivers and things, aren't they? So they're incapacitated in their physical body as more and more medication is given to sort of help them pass over. But you have to wonder what state of mind they're in, because they can't orchestrate and move their physical. Therefore, they're probably screaming in their mind and trying to get message across to the people in the room and their loved ones, and that can go on for days and days generally for people that are passing with tumours and cancer and that type of thing. So it's one of the things that we were quite keen to do. Terry wanted to do like a research project on people in comas and see if we could connect to the person in a coma via the back door through telepathy and talk to the subconscious and try and bring them out of a coma that way, rather than trying to obviously wiggle their fingers and talk to them consciously.
Has that happened before? Have you guys had any success?
We worked with a few people with comas, but they didn't come out of them. They just passed on, basically. But it was going to be like a research project that Terry was quite keen to put together, because, again, it would be really interesting to document it and see if a medium can connect to the spiritual intelligence inside that person that's in a coma, and whether the actual spiritual part has actually left, and therefore the physical body is just being kept alive, with automatic machines, or whether the actual spiritual intelligence is still in there and could then reanimate the body effectively.
Wow. Man, you're needed in every hospital, Andy. They should be doing this with an organ donor, to make sure that they're not going to come back. Because there are people that have come back after even 10 years in being in coma. There was a poor guy that heard everything. He was trapped in his body 10 years, listening to his mother talk all day long, hearing his mother saying things like, "I wish you would just pass on so you could be at peace," and having to listen to that for 10 years. I couldn't imagine.
The thing is, that person still has a subconscious aspect, and therefore the telepathic part of them is still working. So, the way that we teach it, as you know, on the courses and things that we do, meditation and that kind of stuff, it's all about turning the conscious mind off and turning the subconscious part on in meditation. And once the subconscious part is activated, then telepathy comes online, and then you can start talking to things that you can't see, basically. So effectively, practitioners or mediums should be able to connect to someone in a coma and have a conversation with them using telepathy. So it should be simple to do in theory. Whether that person is effectively has left their physical body so they can't come back is another thing. But basically should be able to have a conversation the same way that we, I talk to Chen every day. We all talk to our guides all of the time. If you're a medium, then talking to a person in a coma should be the same concept.
I'm pretty sure I remember an episode of a TV show. I think it was the one with Jennifer Love Hewitt. But they did an episode where she's a medium and she talked to somebody in a coma. So clearly this has been out in the Conscious Collective for a while now. We should definitely do this research once we get some teams going.
Well, it'd be really good to film it, wouldn't it? To actually go into a hospital live and actually stream a medium sat there trying to connect to a person, and to see if we can kind of get the connection, get the conversation moving, and then try and get them to effectively come back. Because, obviously the medicine is going to try and do that with pharmaceuticals. But if the spiritual part has kind of, has distanced itself from the physical body, whether the spiritual energy can come back in. And I feel this every day when I do these chats with Chen, and I talk to him. He comes to me, we're talking, and I give him permission to take over. It's the last thought I have is, okay, over to you, I will say, generally. And we've obviously done a bit of handshaking before we get to that point, but when I actually give him permission to take over my physical body, it's the last thought I have. And the very next thought I have is when I come back in, basically. So for all that time I'm out, the duration of like an hour or 2 hours, I don't have any memory, or there's no conscious part of me that remembers what happens at all. It's completely 1 second gone, next second back, and there's no in between. So it does kind of.
That must be the weirdest sensation ever, to just check out like that and then check back in and be like, I've just spent 2 hours of my life.
It's quite nice if you're feeling tired. A guy came to see me yesterday in Avebury, basically, and I was doing working with him. So Chen came in and took over, and I was feeling quite tired, and I thought it was quite refreshing just to basically hand this tired old body over to Chen, and for me to disappear for an hour and then come back.
So do you feel any more rested? Did you have a nap while you were out?
Yeah, when I come back after a really high vibe, it's like I've kind of had, a kind of, a nap, I guess. So I come back in, because I guess Chen's in, so he's taken over the body. So his vibration is so much higher that when I come back, I kind of feel this buzzy, I could kind of take the world on for 10 minutes type sensation. And then also I settled back into being me, which is different, of course.
Do you feel any different after Chen has been in? So other than the high vibe feeling, do you feel like you've learned anything, or that any changes have occurred, or is it just taken right back off where you left?
Yeah, it feels like I've just taken back off where I left, but I generally have like achy legs because when I do the work standing up, I stand up and put my hands on someone's stomach, and then he takes over, but he doesn't move at all. So we don't move. So like for an hour, I'm in like a stress position. So by the time I come back, I can't move my legs and my knees basically because it's painful to get them to start moving again. So it's kind of like being left in a stress position.
You can get Chen to do your exercise for you.
It's true, actually. Yeah. I can visualize that I've been on a run.
I don't feel like exercising today, Chen. Can you go and do some push-ups for me? Thank you.
He always complains actually about the whole body thing, because every time he comes in, he always moans about how bad it is to have a human body, which is really funny, right? Because like we're all used to it because we're in the body, but when another spirit comes in and takes over, they can't believe how bad it is to be in a physical body, which is actually quite funny, really.
That, honestly, his analogy was great last time about being in one of those big full body underwater antique suits, where they shove you in the water and you're just kind of moving very, very slowly when you're trying to do that. And it made me laugh because he sounded, when he first explained about the possibility of having another body to use, he was very excited. But then he gets the body and he's like, "Man,
yeah, I know.
This isn't how I remember it."
He always complains, too fat, you're too this, you're too that, blah, blah, blah. It's always a list of problems, actually, generally. Or a list of things that I could do better.
Start doing jumping jacks while you talk, Chen.
Well, I do remind him that it actually is my body, and therefore it's my choices as to what I do with it. So, and I don't tend to give this body back in good shape, because there's no point, right? Because we're here to use and abuse it, aren't we? So, I think there's an analogy about come skidding to a halt at the end and say the body's completely knackered because I've used it in the way it was supposed to have been used, as opposed to a well-preserved, well-looked after, great physical body.
Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. There's so many things that I want to ask Chen. Are we going to be able to speak with him today?
Yeah, so should we do that? Yeah, shall I get him in and then you can chat with him, which would be cool.
Cool. I have a lot of random questions to ask him today.
So if I set a timer, because he'll talk all day, as we know.
Yeah, well, it's up to you. How long should we keep him for?
Well, how long do you want? Yeah, an hour is cool with me.
All right. I'll chase him off after an hour.
You probably have to chase him off, actually.
Give us back, Andy.
Yeah, give me back. Okay, so let me just have another sip of my special liquid, otherwise known as coffee. Keeps the body going, apparently. Okay, I'll hand you over then, Laura, and I'll see you in about an hour.
Thank you, Andy.
Good day to you.
Hello, Chen.
Hello, young lady, and how are you?
I'm wonderful. Very excited to be speaking with you today. How's it going?
Yes, for me, it's going very well, thank you. Obviously, I don't have the problems of the physicality to have to worry about, but let's just say there's plenty of things to do on the other side of the veil, so to speak.
I can imagine you're keeping yourself very busy lately. I have some fun questions for you today, and I have some complicated ones, and I have some random ones, so I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to be mixing it up.
Yes, make them as difficult as possible.
Oh, challenge accepted. Well, let's start with some fun questions. Do you miss having a physical body sometimes, or is it more enjoyable to now be working as a soul guide?
Correct. Physical body, as Andrew has said, is a very difficult proposition to have from a spiritual perspective. So the fact that I have the best of both worlds, I obviously exist in spirit effectively, so my spiritual intelligence is intact in that different vibration, and then obviously I have the luxury to be able to use Andrew's physicality in the way that we see here today. So for me, I get the best of both worlds, and of course I don't have all of the orchestrated problems that you have when you're physical, because you generally have a whole list of trials and tribulations that you're testing yourself with. And of course, when you move back into the spiritual dimension, all of those problems evaporate immediately.
That is a relief to hear. So, what is it like to be a soul guide for someone that's incarnated? Do you often get frustrated with us, or are we a bit you have the patience required for dealing with humans?
I think the answer is yes. We often get frustrated because, of course, we may be spiritual energies, but we don't have all of the information. We don't know everything about everything. And it's one of the things that I think people don't realize that are in physical body is that your soul guides, spirit guides, or other interdimensional entities don't have access to all of the information about everything. So we all have our specialist areas that we understand and the things that we do. And obviously, when you choose to incarnate into your physical body as the person that you are today, you work with and choose your soul guides or spirit guides that will be with you generally for most of your life, if not your whole life. And of course, their job is to take you through lots of tests and things that you've actually set yourself to do. So their guide is to guide you. Basically, that's why they are guides. They guide you on your own path. So bad things can happen to you. You can go through traumas. You can go through different types of abuse. Obviously, there's some positive things that generally happen in your life. You may get married and have children and do some positive things that you look forward to. But generally, for most people's life should be difficult, because otherwise you wouldn't be here, because there would be no point in you being here. And in fact, you wouldn't be allowed to be here. So anyone that tells you they have a perfect life would be telling a porcupine from our perspective, because they wouldn't be allowed to incarnate onto planet Earth just to have fun. So everyone is going through difficult times and difficult choices and difficult tests, but generally set by yourself. So of course, the soul guides or spirit guides do feel frustration when you make the choices that really aren't the right choices at the time that you were given them or presented with them. And then they've got to orchestrate putting you in different places to go through different experiences. So relationships is a good one to use. If you're in a relationship with someone and that person is say narcissistic, controlling, has all of the negative attributes, then your test or your true test is to learn to stand up for yourself and obviously put boundaries in place and push that personality back. But then, of course, if you don't do that and that relationship ends, then your guides will basically guide you towards another narcissistic person to give you the opportunity to retry that test again. And of course, if you fail that test again, then the next relationship is the same. It becomes more and more narcissistic. So you end up becoming tested in a much more powerful way, with more and more difficult, controlling, and maybe very abusive partners, because your guide's job is to try to get you to stand up for yourself and put your boundaries in place. And of course, if you're not doing that, then they have to find more negative tests for you until you will potentially do that. And some people, of course, don't do that at all in their whole life. So yes, the job of a soul guide or spirit guide is quite testing in itself.
Wow, understatement there. Thank you very much for that, Chen. That resonates very much. It's something that a lot of us are still working on, setting our value for ourselves and demanding that value.
Yeah, so of course it is the core part of a human's life, isn't it? Because if you think about your life and who you are, your personality and your spiritual intelligence, then you should be protecting and looking after yourself. And this is why I always say service to self must come first. Whereas most people service others first, because that's the way you're brought up and that's the way that your culture and society encourages you to be. But it doesn't work for your own spiritual progression.
Yes, we have. It's something that many of us are working on. Definitely. Wow. Thank you for that. I'm almost speechless there. So, thank you, Chen.
It's nice to hear, my dear. It's not often that you're speechless, I recall.
Yeah, definitely not. That one resonates. Thank you. Something I wish that I had listened. I feel like I have to apologize to my own soul guide now because they've been probably very frustrated with me for a while now. Whoops.
Again,
So,
of course.
what would you? So, go ahead.
Sorry, my dear. No, sorry, my dear. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you the next question. So, go ahead and feel free to share your thoughts there.
No, I was just going to say, of course, if you had this information from a young child, because your parents educated you from a spiritual perspective, then you wouldn't make so many wrong choices because you'd know why you're being presented with the problems that are coming forward in your life, and therefore you would address them.
Yes, that character building that we all need. What would you say is the most effective way for a soul guide to get the attention of the person that they're looking after?
Well, the soul guide contract is benign to start with. So when you actually enter into a physical human body, you incarnate as a person, the soul guide basically is supposed to be non-invasive to you. So you're not supposed to know they exist. You're not supposed to know that they're there. Their only method really of contacting you is using telepathy, of course, because they're spiritual. So therefore, the soul guide's main access point is when you sleep. So if you look at lots of dreams are methods, or can be used as methods, that soul guides use to communicate with the person that they're working with. So this is why quite often people start to have these reoccurring dreams. And the reason they're having them is because the spirit guide or soul guide is trying to use pictorial information to address a problem or to provide some type of prominent learning.
Wow. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, I can see how that would be. The angel numbers, is that part of that? A lot of people look at the angel numbers and they think that it might be a message or something to get their attention. Is that true?
Yes, quite often soul guides can use different methods to basically bring your attention or your awareness to something that is not normal. So if you're driving down the road and you look at a vehicle and you see your name on the vehicle, or you see some type of wording that basically prompts your attention, then quite often they can use these types of methods to basically try to engage you into thought. And of course, quite often they put thoughts in your mind. So, thoughts come in about things. If you're about to leave home, let's say, and you start to have a thought about maybe you've left something upstairs, that could be your soul guide warning you that if you continue along the path you're on, you could be involved in an accident, let's say. But if you just listen to them, go and find the thing that you left upstairs, that 30-second delay takes you out of a potential problem situation. So when you become more spiritually aware and you start to work with your spirit guides, obviously you're working together now as a harmonious team, and they can steer you away from trouble, which of course is a positive thing.
Wow. I missed an exit the other day on the highway, and I was really upset, but that I was annoyed that I missed it. But then I came off the exit and I saw a restaurant called Happy Chen. Yeah. And I laughed my butt off. Was that you?
I did have a hand in that, I have to admit. It was supposed to be a message.
You did.
Yes. And of course, at the time, the thought process you were going through was qualifying some of the things that we talked about. And I wanted to provide you with a funny message that you would be unable to miss.
Well, you got me good. You nearly knocked me off my seat. Because I was listening to case studies when I missed the exit. So yeah. That was hilarious. You got me good that day. Thank you.
Yes, and of course, if you look at the thought process that you've been through since that time, and the fact that you've remembered the incident, obviously it's very prominent now in your own collective memory and your own collective understanding. And that, of course, is also driving your interest level in the work that you're about to do. So I, for one, my dear, will be I'm very excited to meet you in person when you come to the United Kingdom, because of course I will be coming through, Andrew. So we will actually be able to speak together in person and actually touch each other. And when I touch you, you'll be quite surprised, because the energy is enormous when we actually touch each other from a spiritual perspective with the heart chakra open.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to my big hug, Chen. Thank you.
Yes, it will be there and ready for you, my dear.
Very exciting. So I'm going to get into some of the more. Oh, actually, no. I have one more fun question that I wanted to ask you. If you could borrow Andy's body for a whole day, what would you do with it?
Well, I wouldn't do what he does with it, I can tell you that.
No, what would you do?
So, well, it's a very good question. I would probably walk into a wood, so a forest, and I would just lie on the floor, and I would want it to be raining. So there's lots of precipitation, and I would just open my eyes and be able to see all of the energy and all of the fauna and communicate with all of the life in that forest. Because, of course, everything is living. The trees are alive, the grass is alive. I would be able to hear all of the insects underground. I would be able to talk and communicate with all of the birds that are flying around, and obviously enter into dialogue with the land, the trees, and the planet itself. So for me, that would be of huge excitement and of huge importance, really. I know it may sound slightly odd from your perspective because you thought I'd probably go to a beach and lie down and sunbathe or something.
I knew you were going to give me something unique. I didn't have any expectation there. So, I'm not surprised though that you would want to reconnect with nature.
Yes, the planet is a living being, and it has energy, it has thoughts, it has memory. And of course, all of you are connecting to these things all of the time, just that you don't realize it because you're not concentrating on the connection. So if those of you that have pets, animals, especially dogs, if you look at a dog in the eyes, you can connect to the soul and you can connect to them using telepathy. And you know the dog loves you because you can feel the dog will open your heart chakra if you look at it, and you can do the same reciprocally with the dog. So dogs and humans are so connected because the heart chakras connect together. And this is why for many people, if you lose your pet, whether it's a cat or a dog, but dogs in a different way, feel so upset and so traumatized because effectively you've lost a best friend that you've had for the whole of a dog's life. And that dog has loved you in a way that you probably have never been loved by any person, including your parents, of course.
Thank you for saying that. My mom lost her dog of 13 years on Monday, and she's been devastated by that. She's even talking about having it taxidermied and all these things now because she's so distraught over the loss of her dog. And it's very poignant that you would mention that now. Thank you.
Good.
Yes. So I guess we'll get more into the serious questions here. There's quite a lot of questions. People have been wondering about soul fragmentation. Could you give us some more insight into I know it's quite a large topic.
Yes, of course. So the general concept is obviously you as a person that I'm speaking to here today have a physical body that you've incarnated with on planet Earth. And for you to have incarnated, there must be a spiritual intelligence that drives that body. And obviously that is the spiritual part of you, effectively. And that spiritual part of you basically is connected to a greater part, which effectively is the overriding soul aspect. So if you could imagine an orange, let's say, the orange could be classified as the soul group or the soul. And then if you take a segment of the orange, the segment then could become the personality that is yourself, effectively. So it's a tiny fragment of the whole that's still connected. So you as a person with a spiritual intelligence and a name, able to speak, that part of you is still connected to that part of the soul group or the soul family that you come from, and all of the things that you think and do all resonate to and from that soul family or soul group. So effectively you're part of a collective, just that you see yourself as an indeterminate, isolated, autonomous being, but of course you're not. And everything that you experience in a good way or a bad way is then obviously reciprocated back into that soul group, soul portion, if you like, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes sense. So these fragments, we've read that they can actually end up as attachments to other people. How does that work?
Yes, of course. Effectively, the attachments are almost like you would see them or describe them as thought forms. So effectively, a soul fragment can become a thought form with its own intelligence, whereby it doesn't realize it's part of an extended soul group or soul family. It thinks, again, it's an autonomous individual part, and that autonomous part then can become connected to another person's etheric field and attached. And of course, it has its own level of intelligence to a certain degree. So it thinks it's something separate, and it basically acts as though it's something separate. And of course, it then has a negative effect on the actual person that it's attached to.
Wow. So if, let's say our parents have an angry teenager that's latent in their subconscious, they can have that angry teenager attached to us and even kind of have it develop other personal issues for us then.
Yes, and also this is where the conversation becomes slightly complicated, because of course the same concept happens with disassociation of the mind. Effectively, people that have been through lots of trauma, especially veteran soldiers, those sorts of people, end up fragmenting their mind, and those fragmented parts have personalities and have memories, some of them good and some of them bad. And then of course they can attach to either the same person or other people and affect them in negative ways generally.
Wow, that is really powerful.
So I mean, if you think about it if you look at war as a kind of concept, so you send soldiers to war basically that are ill prepared for the emotional experiences they're about to be challenged with and experience. So people that are seeing their best friends that they've spent lots of time training with and learning with and may love in an unconditional way because they're part of a team, when they see them blown to bits or parts of them blown off and they see them going through horrendous pain and such like, that fragments that person's mind for everyone. So all soldiers have fragmentation mentally. They have to have, because to see and witness those things and not be affected would make you non-human, because you're an emotional, energetic being, and the way that you're orchestrated and designed means that you wouldn't be able to go through some of these experiences without fragmenting and disassociating. And this is why many soldiers that come back from war that have seen horrific things are affected by the things that they've seen, and sometimes the things they've done, of course, themselves. And this is why they end up moving into some type of postnatal depression or PTSD or those sorts of problems, because of course they're not able to qualify the things that they've done, seen or experienced, especially with friends that have been so dear to them when they left the mother country. So war is a very testing time for people as humans, but obviously generally it's orchestrated by governments over. It's always been orchestrated by governments over resources primarily. Every war is a resource war, one way or another. It's always about land or resources. And if you look back in time, even back to Roman era and before, again, it was land and resources that people fought about. So humans have been fighting for things that they need to control from the outset, really.
This wasn't actually going to be one of my questions right now, but since we're on the subject, what's been happening in Palestine has been weighing on me quite a lot lately. Is there anything that's being done to protect the souls there that are, going through such a war experience, that are, like they said, 500 people were killed with an explosion just yesterday. So what happens to those 500 souls that died instantly and probably don't even know they're dead? Are there people there helping them, or are they just kind of stuck there in a low vibe area now?
So it's a very good question. So I mean, all war is the same regardless of where it actually happens to a certain degree. Obviously, most people that suffer in wars are civilians and people that are innocent generally. So again, as you say, if 1 minute you're alive and the next minute you're vaporized by some type of weaponry, some bomb or something, then the spirit will be confused. It will be unable to understand what's happened to it, because it suddenly won't have a physical body. So the actual energy, the spiritual intelligence, is left standing where it was last stood in its physical body, but now it's basically moved the vibration back to a spiritual place. So for many people, they just stand where they died for quite some time. And obviously this can go on and extrapolate for years and years and millennia to a certain degree. So what tends to happen is there obviously are cleanup crews that come in from a spiritual perspective. So we have teams of spiritual entities, most of them non-human, so extraterrestrial type entities, that basically are waiting in and around war zones to help and try to clean up some of these souls that have been through that transition in a very fast way. If you know you're going to die and you've got cancer and your death is protracted and quite long, you inevitably know what's going to happen. The spirit has time to prepare for that transition into death, which effectively is just a change of vibration. So most people that die in that way don't really have many problems. They move back to the spiritual plane. They're generally greeted by family members. So the whole process is well practiced, and all of you have been through it many, many times if you're listening to this, because obviously this isn't your first incarnation in planet Earth. But for those people that die in a fraction of a second in these types of battles and wars, the spirit is confused. There is no pain, of course, because pain is only related to the physical body. So as soon as you don't have a physical body, the spirit doesn't have pain in the same way that a physical person, of course, would. But they can be obviously angry. They do have an emotion. You can feel an emotion to a certain degree. Emotion, again, is based upon the physicality. So when I come into Andrew's body now, I can feel his emotions. I can feel how he feels. I can interpret his thought pattern. But as soon as I transition back and leave his body, I don't have emotions from that perspective onwards at all. So if you like, it's not as bad as it would seem from your perspective. And of course, you must remember most of the people that go through these types of events that are happening in places like Gaza would have known this was going to happen when they incarnated. So they would have chosen to go through the experience quite often as a red flag to humanity. When you all watch these things happen on your televisions and your media, that person that's on the television has elected to go through that trauma and that death to raise the flag for people to feel bad, for people to feel upset, for people to feel angry with their politicians. So part of the reason these things happen is to orchestrate change for you as a species. So when you see terrible things happening, the idea is that you, in theory, are being asked to stand up and to speak to your politicians and speak to the people in power, and to basically give your voice that you do not consent in the things that are happening, and you do not consent in the things that they're choosing to do. But of course, the media over the years has become very dominant, and the media that you see these days, a portion of it is probably true and a portion of it is probably untrue, and it's difficult to calibrate where the truth actually is, because of course the media is used to control, manipulate people generally. Does that answer your question, my dear? I know it was a bit protracted and we went off on a few different...
No, it answered it perfectly. And honestly, this is something that I knew already, but I needed validated. So thank you, Chen. Dolores Cannon's books, she also talks about basically how souls will take one for the team, how they will sacrifice themselves in order for the rest of us to get a better perspective and to, have positive change through suffering. And it's a lot. And I thank you very much for putting that into a new perspective for me, because I think the pain from it makes it harder to accept that everything happens for a reason.
Yes, and of course you must remember, my dear, if it's not painful, then you're probably not human, on a funny side of things, because only non-human energies wouldn't feel pain, of which, of course, the planet has lots of.
Yeah. Wow. So why is it that so many souls, they don't see their soul guides when they pass away? Is it due to the confusion they experience when they pass?
Generally, it's down to their level of spiritual understanding would probably be the best terminology. So again, most people have been brought up by parents. They've been educated by their cultural and societal religions, etc. So their perception and understanding of who they are, what they are, and the spiritual aspects is a perception and a reflection of their experience to a certain degree. So of course, if you don't understand that you are actually a spiritual being incarnated in the flesh, and when you die, which you will, you just literally pass yourself straight back to a different vibration, and you still have an augmented intelligence and understanding, as I can show here today, obviously, then for those people, they won't see that aspect at all, because they're not looking for it effectively, and they don't really understand it. So we all talk about, I think you as humans we generally agree, I think, on the concept of when you die, obviously your vision starts to fail. So as the physical body starts to fail, the heart stops beating generally, then of course blood stops flowing around the body. So the physical body starts to lose animation and close down. And at this point, of course, the nerve endings in the eyes start to pull themselves inwards. And this is where people talk about this tunnel of light that they see. But of course, the tunnel of light effectively is the fact that it's the eye mechanism and the retina that's basically turning itself off that produces this effectual tunnel of light. But of course, the reality is what's actually happening is the spiritual part of you is disconnecting from the physical. And as that spiritual part of you, which some people talk about, the silver cord that connects the spiritual intelligence to the physical body, as that breaks and dislocates, then the physical body isn't part of the spiritual part of you. So you wouldn't see white light or a tunnel at all. What actually happens is your vibration immediately changes and moves back into the spiritual vibration where I exist, and obviously everyone else that's dead exists, and lots of other entities and interdimensional creatures exist. So you immediately see who you really are and what you really are, and you remember that you were and you are a spiritual being, not a physical being. So the tunnel of light really is just a part of the physical body dying, but it's not actually showing you the concept that, you know, an angel or your guides or your parents or your family are coming through to meet you, because that vibration change happens in a completely different space. But of course, your parents do come, or grandparents, or your family, or, you know, in my case, I have an agreement with young Andrew that when he passes, I will be the first person that he meets, because of course, I will be there to congratulate and greet him on the work that we've chosen to do together. So he knows that when he takes his last breath, the first thing he will see is me, basically. And no doubt we will chuckle together, and then we'll decide who's the next one up and what do we do next time around, which of course is a repeat of this time, effectively.
Wow.
Except
it's straws again.
Yes, it's back to yes, effectively poker.
Wow. So the white light that some people, I'm just curious, right? For example, what if you're in a coma, right? And your silver cord hasn't severed because your physical body is still alive. Are you still able to cross over into the light?
Yeah. So when whilst you're in a coma, you're still potentially, obviously, still alive. You still have a connection to your physical body, assuming that you haven't actually left it at all. So some people that are in comas, obviously, the spiritual part has died. So if that person's heart stopped beating for a length of time, then the silver cord will have basically severed itself, probably, and the spiritual intelligence has left. So you're left with a physical body that with medical science they can keep alive, because of course it's a physical thing, but effectively there's no intelligence left inside it. So that person will never open their eyes or move their hands or do or say anything, because there is no spiritual intelligence left connected to actually orchestrate and animate that body.
Wow. So once I'm just curious as to how you guys, when you for example, when there is an earthbound attached to somebody and you open up is it a portal of light then? Is it a tunnel? I mean, I'm just curious how that opens. And then you say that their loved ones come to get them and then they leave. Is that because I'm just curious because people, they say when they die, the white light leaves and then they don't know that they can call it back again.
Yes, quite often this happens. The white light is really a visual interpretation of a frequency of vibration that happens. So when they die, they're presented with a new frequency of vibration because the physical body is now dead and doesn't exist. So the spiritual part basically can ascertain that effectively they don't have a body anymore. And this is where we talk about the white light concept, but it's more of a pictorial view for humans to understand that there is a light that comes on that you then are attracted to. The actual reality, of course, is it's a vibration that opens up to you, that attracts you and tries to pull you towards it, but you can elect and choose not to do that. And then if that's what you choose to do, obviously the guide team, grandparents, whoever came forward in that frequency of vibration obviously leaves at some point, and therefore you're left in that indeterminate space until maybe a soul guide, a retriever or SRT practitioner comes along and basically finds you somewhere, or you attach to another person, and then of course you effectively are transitioned through that way. So when we as a team connect to a client and that client has attachments, we converse with them. So we speak to them, we say that you know that you've passed, you know that you're dead, you know, they tell us why, generally what happened to them as part of their death. And then we say, well, you know, obviously we would encourage you to basically change your vibration and move back to the spiritual vibration, which is effectively is your home. So again, different terminology, but you know, to back into heaven, if you like, from a spiritual and or religious perspective. And just about every single 99.9% of attached discarnate spirits will come through with us, because they can see that we have a team, they can see that we're positive, there's no fear, and we basically handhold them, taking them through to that different vibration. So that's the way that method works. Whereas if a client has an entity attached, a negative entity, because of course we're only looking for negative things when we do clearings on people, spirit release therapy, a negative entity will have connected through a perforation in the etheric field, generally to the top of the neck. So the part of the neck that has all the nerve endings is the first place they try to attach to, because at this point, of course, this is where they can manipulate the thought structures and they can manipulate the body, and they can start to encourage people to move towards addictions, to drugs, to alcohol, those sorts of things. So entities tend to always go through the top of the neck as the first part of the connection. And then once they're connected in that way, they obviously start to basically weave their way into the person's etheric body. So they start to encourage lots of things that are negative to a person. So again, drugs, alcohol, those types of things. So the etheric field starts to perforate in more and more places, which opens up more access to that negative entity. So it's a bit like if you could visualize an octopus, basically, with lots of arms. The first arm comes through and connects to the top of your neck. And then as more perforations open, the other arms and legs of the octopus find other places to connect to you. And the more places they can connect to you, the more they can control your nerve endings, which is why people have odd sensations. They have pains in different parts of their body that are unexplainable by science or medical science or the medicine industry. And then, of course, they start to have intrusive thoughts. Those intrusive thoughts obviously take people down the pathway of becoming fearful. So that person moves into a state of fear or anger, both of which, of course, cause negative vibrations. So this person then starts to vibrate at quite a negative frequency. And that entity continues that process on and on. And of course, for some people, you know, they obviously start hearing voices, because the entity will then open the etheric field to the point that they can then attach discarnate spirit. So the entity will find people that have died, that are hanging around, as you discussed a moment ago, and they basically try to impregnate those discarnate spirits into this person's etheric field. So again, if you can imagine different connections being pushed into your etheric field, of course, these connections are intelligent because it's a discarnate spirit, so it has an intelligence and it can talk using telepathy. And then the person that's suffering starts to hear voices, and the voices tell them that their name is Jack and they died like this or they died like that. And of course, the entity is controlling this whole thing. So you end up with a longer term prominent trajectory whereby the entity tries to get the person to a point that they would commit suicide. And this is why so many people commit suicide when they have attachments, because that's the end goal for an entity. If you take your life as a human, the moment you take your life, your blood's full of adrenaline, it's full of fear, it's full of anger, and all of those vibrations and emotions are basically assimilated by negative entities, because it's what they exist on. They live in that space, and that's what they have as their substance. So they're always looking for the most negative experience for a human being, and the most negative experience for a human being is to take their own life in the event of suicide. So this, of course, is basically the process, if that makes sense to you.
Yes, it does. What happens to a soul once they've taken their own life and they are now in the astral with these entities?
So basically, at that point, the entity has assimilated most of what it wants. So some entities will continue to control the discarnate spirit. So basically, they still possess it effectively and have a connection into it, so they can manipulate it and use it in that way. Some entities just leave that person or that discarnate spirit altogether and just leave them hanging around. And then, of course, that person would have been through a life-ending event, so they would be traumatized, they would be angry, they would be in a very emotional state. So they probably wouldn't pass back to spirit properly, therefore they would be left in between. And this is what we term as a discarnate spirit, someone that doesn't have a physical body but hasn't returned back to the spiritual vibration that we exist on when we pass. So they're kind of left in between. And this is obviously where people like yourselves come along, and you have cleanup crews that are walking around cities and places all of the time, and they're connecting to discarnate spirits that are left hanging around, and basically effectively visualize opening a doorway and inviting them to go through to the right vibration. Because of course that's basically, as a human being, that's what you can do. You can orchestrate the movement of a discarnate spirit from a change of vibration, from their death back into the spiritual realm. So you can do that, and that's why so many mediums obviously do this as a kind of job to a certain degree, because there's no end of discarnate spirits that are hanging around that have been left and don't know what to do and have no concept of time. They have no emotions anymore, although they know that they felt angry when they transitioned. So they're basically left looking for something that they don't really know and understand. A bit like if you took a child from school and you basically picked them up and you put them in the car and you drove them to a different city, and then you pushed them out the door and said, just wait there for a moment. The child would stand there, would have no idea where it is, how it got there, what it's supposed to do. It wouldn't know what it was waiting for. It would just be completely lost, basically. So that's the same concept as a kind of discarnate spirit that hasn't passed over properly.
Can we do SRT sessions on people that haven't crossed over, that we believe, like, for example, took their life? Would we be able to do an SRT session on them and still find them and have them cross over?
Yes, you can still connect to them, because if you're a medium and you're using telepathy and working with your guide, you can still connect to their vibration and their energy. So again, when young Andrew wants to talk to Terence, obviously, he puts the thought out that he wishes to communicate to Terence, and Terence will hear that vibration come in, and then it's Terence's choice as to whether he wishes to communicate or whether he wishes to ignore the request. And the same happens in reverse. Your spirit guides, if they want to talk to you, will request, generally through sleep, for people that aren't mediums, to connect to you, and you may hear that voice, or you may not understand the communication method. But for people that are mediums, that are talking to other energies and other entities, of course, because of course there are lots of entities that exist on planet Earth that you can't see, that all use telepathy to talk to you. So it's not just discarnate spirits that mediums are able to converse with. They can converse with other energies, but it's intention based. So if you know someone that took their life and you wish to communicate with them, you can put the thought out as a request to connect to them. Of course, at that point, it's their choice whether they request to communicate backwards to you. And quite often, people that pass, you go to see a medium because your dear mother passed, and the medium can't find that person or can't get the connection. And quite often, it's because the person that passed knows the pain that you're going through, and they know that if they do communicate with you, it makes things more difficult, and you're then unable to work through the grief process properly. So there is a balance that needs to be struck with this type of communication method.
Wow, that's very poignant. Thank you for pointing that out, because I think some of us needed to hear that today. Wow. Could you give us a little insight with some of the ETs that you work with, some of the still living ETs that are involved in some of these clearings and
yes, of course. So from our perspective, in terms of numbers, we have hundreds of extraterrestrial entities that are part of our team that we work with, all of which come with different skill sets. Obviously, the same as we talked about earlier, each individual spirit guide has a profession, if you like, and different entities from different planets and galaxies and universes obviously come with, again, different levels of experience and understanding. And there are many entities that we work with that are here in a view-only role. So they're watching what's happening on planet Earth, and they're learning from and understanding the species that we would call the bipedal human, which of course is yourself. So from our perspective, there are hundreds of different star systems and entities. So all of the normal ones that you would have heard of, and you know yourself because you're from them, are obviously part of the team. But there's an extraordinary number of planets and therefore extraterrestrials that we work with. So we obviously have Pleiadian energies, we have reptilian, we have a lot of insectoids that work with us, which of course is interesting because the insectoid species is very dominant and very negative in a lot of star systems. And I don't know if you've noticed, my dear, but most humans have a huge fear of spiders. Certainly.
Yes.
And there's a reason for that. So if we look at the intellectual dimensions of a human being, if you live in a country that's never had an aggressive spider as part of it, and the spiders are very small. So here in the United Kingdom, where young Andrew lives, they don't have big spiders. They don't have spiders that can kill you generally. So every person that lives in the United Kingdom should not be afraid of a spider because it's tiny. It doesn't bite and kill you. But of course, there's a huge level of the population that do. And this is because going back in Earth's history, there were insectoid wars that happened, and most people were actually fighting insectoid species, and lots of people died because the insectoid is a very aggressive, or was a very aggressive extraterrestrial species, and many people were put to death by insectoids. So this would explain why, as a consciousness, so many people on planet Earth that reincarnate here have this huge aversion and fear of spiders, but for no particular reason.
God, I just got flashbacks from what is that movie? Super Troopers, or what is it? What is it called? Starship Troopers. That's the one. Starship Troopers, where they're fighting a whole planet of insects. Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. So the insects.
Wow, Chad, I was not expecting.
Yeah. So I'd like to give you some different information, young lady. So, but of course, it answers the question. So I'm sure many people are sat listening to this now, thinking, "Goodness me, I never really understood why I was scared of a spider." But I've just remembered why, because I know that I was put to death by that species in a previous life on a different planet, more than likely.
Holy shit. Wow.
So I know many of you talk about the reptilians as being, the bad guys, but the reptilian as a species is actually quite good. We have a team that has a large number of reptilian energies that work with us that are wholly positive. They're very good. They have a very unique skill set, which is why we embrace working with them. But again, humanity as a species has this concept that all reptilians are bad, because of course that's the general understanding that's being pushed in different places. But again, like everything, there's always a balance. So if you have, there are negative species in every star system, as there are positive ones of the same species. So the same as humans, you have good humans, you have bad humans. So it's the same concept.
Wow. So ironically, on my list, one of the questions that somebody submitted was they wanted to know about dragons. So I think this is the perfect time to ask his question. So are you working with dragons? Are they real? They're the benevolent ones you're talking about?
Of course. So there were dragons that lived in the physical on planet Earth, and the dragon energy, Dragonus, effectively, is how we would term them. We have them on our team. They're very prominent in humanity's conscious culture and understanding, and they still exist here in etheric form. So on my team, I have a whole host of dragon energies, Dragonus we call them, that we work with and are able to do things. And again, as a species, they've been demonized in a way and seem to be negative, and of course the adversary, really, the negative aspect, has always been characterized by dragons. So we've talked about negative entities or demonic entities being in dragon form that breathe fire, and they, that's always the archetype, if you like. But of course, like everything, there's always the positive archetype that's here. And the reason that the dragon energy is so prominent in human history is because they're in the earth. So you have etheric or ethereal dragons that live and are part of planet Earth and are part of the Earth substrate. So this is why they're so prominent in humanity's conversation, because they're actually part of the ecosystem that you live in. And many of you, of course, have worked in magical circles in probably past lives, certainly on planet Earth. And this is where this whole Merlin concept comes forward, where you have the old man with the white beard and the rather long stick with the big round crystal on the top. So these sorts of characters and archetypes basically go back to that era, that there were some of these entities that existed in the physical on the planet back in time. But of course, a lot of that information has been corrupted and changed over the years because, of course, it's been adulterated for control, effectively. Does that make sense to you, my dear?
Oh, it really does, and we're all very excited to hear that. We've intuitively known the dragons are real and that they're helping us, but we just didn't really have an inside scoop on that. So thank you very much, Chen, for validating that for us and for mentioning Merlin. We're big fans of Merlin as well.
Yes, well, of course, the Merlin energy is a positive archetypal energy that exists, and you can connect in meditation to the energy of the Merlin spirit, if you like, and connect and talk to it, the same as you can connect to Dragonus. So in meditation, you can command or ask to connect to the energy of dragon that's part of the Earth's ecosystem, and obviously enter into dialogue with that energy. And of course, many people that walk the planet, you have different television programs, do you not? And one of them is a young lady, I believe, that basically works with dragons, or she commands dragons, or something along those lines. And that TV program has come to fruition because the dragon energy is moving and evolving in a very strong and positive way at the moment on planet Earth. So they're coming back, if is the wording that I would suggest.
So you mean we might be able to see dragons someday? Again?
Mediums will be able to see them very soon, the same as they'll be able to see extraterrestrial entities very soon. Some can see them now today, but they are coming back, or they're planning to come back in form. So in physical form again, as the vibration gets to this break point where things start to, the 3D world starts to fragment basically, and the 3D starts to become 4 and 5 at the same time, then people will start to see some of these other entities. And this is part of the reason that we're all here, of course, is because we're all here to prepare for the shift. And the shift may sound positive, but it's going to be quite painful for lots of people. And there are going to be people that need to carry the torch and walk forward, which of course is probably most of the people on this particular medium. Because people
is there any way that we can prepare ourselves for the shift that's coming?
So the SRT work that we do is part of the preparation, which of course is why I myself am here. I'm here to help to raise the vibration, as I've discussed before. So clearing people, raising the vibration of the planet is the first phase from our perspective. And as the planet's vibration equalizes and starts to ascend, at that point the dimensional shift will start to happen and people will start to see into different dimensions. And this is when things can become quite difficult for many people, because effectively whilst you're walking down the road, you may start to see other interdimensional entities that will be ethereal but partly physical.
Out of my peripheral, I have noticed already I'm starting to see things. And I my ego, of course, I'm like, nah, you didn't see anything. So it's really happening now then, kind of, in a way,
yeah,
for some people.
Happening. So to you, the people, these sorts of people, the people listening here would probably be the first wave. So most mediums that already communicate using telepathy to interdimensional entities and guides would be the first wave, because they're already used to connecting and talking to things that they can't see, even though they can perceive them and they can have an intelligent conversation in the way that we're discussing today. So mediums are the first wave, basically. And then as things start to change and vibrate, then the rest of humanity is going to start to see things that don't make sense. And of course, this is the exact moment when the control system will need to play its hand to try to bring control back into...
They're going to try and lower the vibration through fear and manipulation, I'm sure.
Yeah. So this is, I know lots of you talk about different events, but obviously if we're talking about people seeing interdimensional entities, then of course, from a control system perspective, that would be framed as an invasion of extraterrestrial entities, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. What about angels? A lot of people want to know about angels. How are they different to the biblical version?
So the biblical version, of course, is a graphical image of a very strong angel with a huge big sword or stick or something, and that type of thing. So again, it's a graphical picture. An angel effectively is a vibration, the same as myself, the same as everything spiritual. It's just that their vibration is extremely high if they're positive, and of course they therefore wield a lot of powerful energy from a spiritual perspective. And of course they have a consciousness like I do and like everything else that's spiritual. So you can connect to an archangel, you can talk to them, you can enter into dialogue. Obviously, they can choose not to connect to you, of course, because, like everything, there is a free will choice both ways around. But angels and obviously demonic entities are the inverse of an angelic frequency of vibration, is a demonic entity in the way that you understand things. So they also have an intelligence and can be spoken to. And this is the way that we tend to clear demonic entities from people, is we don't battle them and basically go to war with them. We converse with them. So we say, the person that you're currently possessing has used their free will and elected to ask for or orchestrate a clearing, an energetic clearing, which is what we do. So we talk to them and say, you have a choice. Either you can disconnect your energy and vibration from that person with your own choice. If you do that, then of course they're effectively let go to a certain degree. Or if they refuse to do that, then we would remove them forcibly from that person's etheric field, and then they will be taken out of this complete dimensional vibration, so they can't come back and reconnect to any physical human person. So we don't go to war with things generally. It's done on a much more intelligent, constructed method. Which is why, of course, this type of therapy has been developed, because the old world, if you look at the biblical version and the religious version, it's about going to war with, the adversary, the demonic entity, that type of thing. It's about using ritual and all sorts of other things to try and cast things out. Well, of course, that's the old world, but this is a new vibration, and we do things very differently in this new vibration, and we don't need to go to war in the same way. And that's why it's so much safer for the practitioner of spirit release therapy, because you're dealing with a team headed by myself generally, and we're the ones that are working on your behalf. Therefore, it's a much safer place for you to be doing that. If you look at a lot of the church's exorcists, a lot of them have been attacked, a lot of them have suffered pain and injury for the work that they do when they've tried to exorcise entities from people and cast out demonic species. But we don't have that problem in the way that we work, because you're one layer away from the actual problem, and of course you're protected by us effectively. So it's a completely different method of practice.
Thank you. That instilled some confidence that was that was needed. So thank you very much for that, Jen. So when we want to call in, let's say that we feel that we are dealing with an attachment. Can we call in the soul guides and the archangels ourselves, and they will actually come?
Yes, of course. So again, it's intention and thought primarily. So the problem becomes, of course, coming back to the start of this conversation, that if your particular soul guide or spirit guide isn't well versed in removal of entities, then they may struggle to do that on your behalf. Whereas, of course, if you invoke an angelic entity, so an archangel of some description, or obviously myself and our team, then of course you're using your intention to invoke a different type of help that understands the problem and will probably help to resolve it in a better way for you.
Interesting. So I just had Andy's experience that happened to him on Monday pop into mind, and I thought I would ask you about it a little bit. So if we are protected, how come things like that can happen when when we're going about our daily lives? Where Andy was attacked the other day by something in the old folk home. So can you explain a little bit about how that happened and what happened?
Yes, it's a very good question. It's good for him to know. So basically the main problem, or two problems primarily, mostly his own fault, if you like. So for one, obviously he's very relaxed. It's a weekend. He's in his comfort zone, so he's not expecting to be attacked. So whilst spending time in a care home, there were 4 people that had been deceased during that day or week, and of course were hanging around. So they connected to him and followed him home when he left, because of course you leave an etheric signature, a vibratory signature when you're walking around rather like a dog can follow the scent of a person, entities and energies can follow your vibration, so they can follow you home. So it's quite important when you're out somewhere, especially in cities, to protect your energy when you come home. And obviously you can do this in different ways, using meditation and sort of visualizing, a gate behind you or some type of protective barrier behind you when you're leaving an area that could be at risk. So obviously he didn't do that, and then came home during the day. Before, he'd been working for a client with some hugely negative satanic entities that were part of a big collection that he knew was powerful, and he also was very aware they were quite dangerous. But of course, there is an egotistical part of most humans when you do this type of thing every day. So his opinion was that he would be protected and would be fine. And of course, generally, we make sure that he is protected and fine. But occasionally, we choose to let things slip through the net as a reminder that he's not quite as infallible as he would like to seem. So from our perspective,
I had a feeling.
we allowed that type of problem, and it wasn't actually for long, as much as he may sound like it was a big problem. It was probably only for a couple of hours that he was fighting to retain his consciousness. Of course, it's poor Jane that really has the bigger problem, because she has the emotional aspect to have to deal with, and it's her that's seeing the physical problem enacted physically. She's seeing the change of personality, the change of vocabulary, the change of eye colour. So for poor Jane, it's a bigger problem than it was for Andrew, let's put it that way.
Wow.
And of course, it's made him sit up and realise that when we're working with some of these people that are very well known from a planetary perspective, they're coming in with some pretty negative entity problems, and therefore your own protection does need to be considered in a different way, let's say. So it was more of a learning curve.
So don't get cocky. Gotcha.
And of course, it happens in all jobs, doesn't it? If you do something all of the time, every day, you become complacent. And unfortunately, complacent can be problematic. And there are many people that do this type of work. Again, if you look at the Catholic Church and exorcists, there are many exorcists that have been possessed by the things that they're trying to clear and remove on behalf of their clients. And some of them end up in mental institutions because that possession level is strong enough not to be removed. So, excuse me. So from our perspective, we just remind them occasionally that even though they think they're infallible, they do need to bear in mind that actually they're not. And of course, from my perspective, I've invested a huge amount of my effort and time into working with Andrew for the last at least 30 years. So I need to make sure that he's able to work.
Yes. Wow. That is a teaching moment for all of us, really. Thank you for that, Andy and Chen, for that.
Of course.
Wow.
All of your guides do this every day. They elect to let things happen to you because you need to learn things, or they need to remind you of things. So, the guide team isn't there to give you a fantastic life and protect you from everything that's bad. They're there to help you learn things about yourself and help you go through different trials and tribulations in your life, because that's why you're here. And of course, from my perspective, Andrew has his own physical life as the person that you know as Andrew to go through. So he has to learn things. He has to go through good things and bad things and have the same experiences that you all have to have. So he's no different from anyone else in that perspective, which is why at times I stand back and allow some challenging things to be put in his path, let's say.
Keeps him on his toes, I imagine.
Yes, well, it stops him getting too cocky, I think is the right word.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So I'm going to ask a couple questions from our followers that submitted these questions for me about the last couple days. One of our followers wanted to ask about nonverbal children with autism and what we can do to help and protect them.
Yes, it's a very good question. So for most children that have autism, most of it is toxic damage from different things, obviously. So therefore, what you actually have is you have a corrupted pathway. So the spiritual intelligence is still concurrently clear inside, But of course, what they're unable to do is unable to orchestrate the physical, verbal aspect to the parent or to the person. So inside themselves, they know and think everything, they can hear everything that you say, but they're just unable to answer you in the same way. So it's a bit like a handicap, effectively, that they're given. So from a parental perspective, if you just treat them and talk to them in the same way you would treat and talk to a normal child that didn't have a problem with autism, even though they can't really respond in the way that you want them to, they understand, and it removes the levels of frustration that otherwise you may well see. But of course, predominantly you actually have a corrupted brain stem, which is where the problem comes from in the first place.
Right. And are they more susceptible to entity attachments due to their situation?
Yes, so many of these children that have these types of problems obviously don't have the same mental construct that you have if you would be what you could be classed as a normal person with a normal vocabulary and a normal mental construct. And therefore, of course, they can converse with things in a completely different way, and therefore they are more open to attack from the negative aspect. Because, of course, the negative aspect knows that they are open. Some of them are very telepathic continually. They talk to things that they see. So negative things can masquerade as positive things. And obviously it puts them in a more dangerous position from that perspective. The same type of concept that we were talking earlier with dementia patients, whereby when they're not of right mind, entities and other discarnate spirit can use them if they want to, and they can come in and they can come out. And many dementia patients obviously have portals that are opened. So you have other spiritual energies coming in and coming out continually.
Wow. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Is there anything we can do to help them with that situation, or just protect them normally, as we would normally
if you're a parent of that type of person with that type of problem or child, again, just spiritual protection, the normal concept of seeing them in a bubble, just a normal daily method of protection in the same way that you would protect yourself will obviously protect them. So again, you can engage with their guides. You can put the thought out in your mind to connect to your guide or their guides to help protect them. Just the normal things that you would do. The same as when you leave home and it's raining, you put a raincoat on. You don't even think about it. You just throw on a raincoat because you know it keeps you dry. The same concept with that level of protection.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Lots of people, since you're talking about the toxic things that end up in our bodies sometimes, there's quite a lot of people that are concerned about the C jab that they took under pressure from the government. Is there anything that can be done to lessen or reverse the negative effects that may be occurring due to this?
Yes, of course. So one of the terms I used, so when this started to happen, young Andrew said to me at the very start of this whole episode, "What's going on here?" And I said to him, "You probably won't want to take it primarily because effectively, if it's not designed, your body is a physical vehicle, and everything that's designed to go in you is designed to go through the hole in the front of your mouth, basically. Right. So anything that goes into your veins or into your blood isn't by general design, because of course you're bypassing the whole filtration system. So if you eat something, your body has acid in the stomach, it can process it, it can extract nutrients. So the whole makeup of you as a bipedal person, a human, is designed for everything to go in your mouth. So anything that doesn't go in your mouth isn't really designed for you. So once things are in your bloodstream, obviously they can still be detoxified out of the bloodstream. So again, with changes of diet, using vegetables and juicing and all those sorts of things. But of course, this particular type of vaccine, as it's described, although it probably isn't really a vaccine in the way that they describe it for most people, but if we work on the concept that the general idea was it was supposed to be good for you, obviously there are things and carriers in that vaccine that are left in people's blood, and those things need to be detoxed and cleared and removed. So you can do this through all sorts of metal chelation techniques. Again, you're using your body. The body is designed to filter things and remove things. That's how you live. That's why you live for so long, because everything that you eat that has toxins, your body works to clear and remove. So the same concept with these types of vaccines. There are lots and lots of practices that you can use to basically remove the different parts of the toxicity effectively. So metal toxicity is a big problem for most people, because most of your packaging of food contains aluminium and contains metals. The body is building up metal all of the time, and these vaccines come with metal carriers and metal substrates in them. So again, metal detoxification is the first thing that I would be suggesting that people try to do, because of course metals get left in organs. That's the basic problem.
Yeah.
And if metals get left in the brain and the brainstem and parts of the neurological system, then they affect the way you think. So trying to remove those sorts of things from your blood is the first thing to do. But it's certainly
even the things like cavities, the what do you call it, the fillings, the mercury fillings and things. These can also cause issues. Yeah, I imagine.
Yes, of course. It's again, the human wasn't really designed to have toxic metals stuck in their mouth, really. So although they might look good from a tooth perspective, it's not particularly good from a holistic perspective. And of course, you have to remember that the energy is moving around your body, electromagnetic energy is moving around your body continually, and it moves around your jawline continually. So when you lose a tooth, if you take a tooth out, and then of course the socket basically fills itself with normal parts of your body, effectively, the electromagnetic communication and connection around your jaw stays sustained. But if you put a metal tooth in, or you put something else in, you drill a pilot hole and you have some piece of metal sticking in a tooth with some type of cap on, you've obviously stopped and blocked that line of energy flowing. And that then means, of course, that you will, over time, start to be affected by different types of things, because effectively you've stopped and broken that energetic flow. So for most people, the concept of having a full mouth of teeth that look lovely is fantastic from a visual perspective. But of course, if you're drilling huge pieces of metal into the middle of your bones in your mouth, then those pieces of metal, one, are obviously electromagnetic. They conduct electricity because they're metal. So effectively, there's a conduction of energy happening that shouldn't be happening in different parts of your overlaid system of bones around your mouth, which can and will cause problems over time.
Wow, so heavy metal detoxes are very important. Good to know.
Yes. And you yourself, my dear, of course, know this, because that's what you were doing, I believe, only yesterday, young Andrew happened to mention.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, we did. So, yeah, it's one of the things, because I did have my mercury fillings removed, and I just want to make sure the residual stuff is out. So thank you for that. I just want to ask a question, because this is a very popular question that people are asking about. Do you know about a race of ETs that are lions and highly advanced cats?
The feline, yes, of course. Yes, we have
The
some of them
feline
that work.
races. Could
The
you tell us
feline
about them a little bit? Because we're big fans.
of the feline in particular.
Well, there is a race that they say that is actually a feline extraterrestrial race that is hanging around here on Earth.
Yes, there's just about every incarnation of every race that's hanging around on Earth generally, just that, of course, you can't see them. And most of them interact with you as humans most of the time. So from a feline perspective, there are, if you look at the paintings, of course, on some of the Egyptian pyramids and things, you see these images of a human body with a bird's head and all sorts of other orchestrated versions of that. Of course, this is depicting these types of species that used to be walking on the planet in time gone by. And of course, lots of them are still here in their etheric format now, not in their physical particularly.
Wow. Okay.
And of course, you can work with them and talk with them.
Really? Through meditation?
Yes, through meditation, you can wish to connect to their archetype species, and you can then converse with them. And of course, many of them are actually working with humans. Some of them, of course, have, as you know yourself, there are humans walking around that don't really have an energetic spiritual essence, effectively, because there are entities that are populating the human form, if you like, and are here to help and do things in a positive way, the same as there is the same from a negative aspect. And this, of course, is what...
You mean star seeds? You're talking about star seeds coming here, yes.
Yes, that type of thing. So this is the concept, that film that was made some time ago by Mr. Cameron, the Blue People film. That was the concept.
Avatar, yes.
Yeah, so he has actually spoken with and met some of these interdimensional races in the physical, and that's what the Hollywood films are basically based upon, is his relationship and understanding with these entities.
Wow. That resonates with quite a lot of us, I'm sure, because many of us are starseeds here. So the other side, the dark side, so to speak, has starseeds too. That's interesting.
Of course, yes, there's always balance. So everything is balanced. But planet Earth isn't really in balance because the negative aspect has had a hold on planet Earth for a long time. So the planet hasn't really been in balance, not certainly from a positive, negative perspective, for quite a long time. And this, of course, is why the control system is primarily negative. It's why governments are primarily negative. And as we were talking earlier, it's why there have been so many wars on planet Earth over resources. So this balance is now shifting, which is why, of course, it's such a delightful time to be here in your physical form, because none of you realize that the waiting list to get into planet Earth is enormous. And for you to be here today means you've qualified.
Wow. So we have the golden ticket, so to speak.
Basically, you could look at it as a golden ticket. Some people don't really see it in that way, of course, when you're actually here, because it's not particularly fun to do and live a human life, as we talked about at the start of the conversation. But the most people that are here, and certainly people on this type of call, will have been drawn to this information because they need activating. They're remembering why they're here, what they're here to do, and this will be the light bulb moment that turns them on, and they stand to attention and think, yes, this is why I am here. Unfortunately, I'm not here to spend all day lying in the sun, sunbathing, worrying about my teeth looking white, particularly.
I hear there's other planets for that with better beaches.
Yes, as I said, Andrew, planet Earth is not a holiday destination generally.
Wow. So any final advice for anybody today? Because I've taken up quite a bit of your time already. Anything you would like to leave us with today, Chen?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I love these conversations with passion, and I so look forward to having the ability to be able to communicate and talk and answer all of your questions with integrity and give them with love from my perspective. It's Andrew, of course, that has the physical time constraints because unfortunately he has the physical body. From my perspective, I could spend all day conversing with all of you. So from my conversation the last time we spoke, if you remember, I exited the conversation saying people should laugh if they want to feel better, and laughter changes your vibration, it opens your heart center, and it helps the planet. And again, this is, my dictate is to stay away from any negative media. So the more negative media that enters your conscious awareness changes your frequency of vibration. And because there's so much negativity happening on the planet that you see, because you don't see the good things that are happening because it's not reported and presented, then of course your awareness starts to drop into that lower state and people start to feel frustrated and anxiety. And I think anxiety is now probably the biggest problem for most people on planet Earth. And that anxiety is coming because of the media levels of information being pushed out, because people feel helpless. They feel as though their life isn't particularly positive. It can't be positive. There are too many trials and problems. And of course, when they watch the television, as we discussed earlier, you see all of this death and carnage. And that's designed purposely to bring your vibration down. So my advice for this particular session would be to start to laugh, to mix with people that are fun and feel good, and pretend that every day is a good day. You're going to feel good. You're going to laugh. You're going to find something that fills your spirit, and you'll start to feel the change in your mental construct very quickly. But the key thing is to stay away from the negative media.
Yes, that happened to me last night. I went to YouTube to look at something positive, and I saw an ad for what happened in Gaza, and it broke my heart, and it put me into a whole miserable state last night just seeing one video. So that is very true, and it's a very aptly timed advice. Thank you so much for that, Chen.
Yes, and you must remember, my dear, from that perspective, everyone is here with a remit to do certain things. So some people are here to be activists. to stand up and fight and to be taken out, basically. There are some people that are here to be in the trenches and to be covert and to change through subversion to a certain degree. So all of you have a different thing that you're supposed to be here for. And all of you are empathic, emotional beings. So any projection of small children dying in wars and being blown to bits and those sorts of things, the media know that this will affect everyone, which is why they broadcast it. So, of course, and some of it's not even true. Some of it is effectively, developed and made in, in theatre events, effectively, because they know the effect it has on people. And, of course, you must remember those people that are losing their lives in Gaza and places have also elected to be there at this point in time as part of their own progression, and they're there to help to raise the awareness. And the best thing all of you could do is turn the media off and then write to your member of parliament or politician and tell them, basically, not in my name. I don't agree with decisions being taken, and I don't agree with things that are happening in these places, regardless of the narrative that's provided. And that has more power than anything else that you could possibly imagine, because if you acquiesce and don't stand up, you effectively confirm by negation, effectively. Does that
So
make
writing
sense?
letters to politicians works even though they're not real, all of them? Or they have entity attachments?
It doesn't work because they won't change what they do because they're controlled anyway. But what it does, it just removes your energy from the collective, basically. So if everyone says not in my name, then effectively the collective energy has stepped backwards and said, you don't have my agreement to make these decisions and do these things. So even though you may still have a load of corrupt politicians that are controlled from negative entities and such like, the energy is removed from them because everyone has basically stood up and pulled their energy back. So that's the power. And that's why they don't want you writing to them, because they know that the narrative if you write to your member of parliament or your politician, they won't do anything, which of course they don't do anything, which is why they know that no one's going to write to them, because they're not there to do anything for you as people. They're there as part of the control system. But if people just write and say a one-liner, not in my name, I don't agree, it pulls your energy away from the things that they're choosing to do. And on an etheric perspective, that makes a change.
Wow, I knew non-consent was powerful. I didn't expect it to be that powerful. Thank you.
Yes, and that's why the Buddhists do this, of course. When you see Buddhists, this is how they work. They basically sit in a line in front of a tank and say, not in my name, basically. And the system struggles with that because the system is designed for aversion and war. So the system wants you to go to war with it because it knows it will win. But if everyone turns around and walks away, then effectively the system is unable to cope with that type of method of practice, if you like.
Yes, you just gave me a great new idea on how we can fight the system, Chen. Thank you.
Good. I like to be of service, my dear. So
you're wonderful.
I've thoroughly enjoyed
Thank you,
the
Chen.
So
I'm looking forward to my hug next month.
Yes, it will be waiting for you, my dear.
Much love.
And bring young Andrew back, and no doubt we will speak again at some point soon.
Thank you, Chen. We love you. Have a wonderful day. Morning, sunshine.
Good morning, afternoon, evening. It's still raining here, funny enough.
Is it? Well, we didn't keep it too long.
No, I did hear the alarm go off at some point, which I thought, that was quick.
I was going to say, it went a little bit over an hour, but he was keeping us captivated.
Yeah, well, Channel Talk, well, he's got a lot of interesting things to say, isn't he, to be fair? So, it's not a big surprise, really.
Exactly. He did give us a little insight into what happened to you on Monday. You're definitely going to have to rewatch this one.
Oh, did he? He hasn't told me, actually.
Yeah, it was meant to take you down a peg or two.
That happens all the time, Brian, generally. And if Chen's not doing it, Jane's doing it. So, I can't come up too far, generally.
Yeah.
I will listen to this, though, afterwards and find out what he did actually say, because obviously quite often we talk about things, but not that often does he actually give me the full picture. It's always a kind of, a bastardized version of events, generally, as opposed to the full thing. So it'll be interesting to see what he said to you guys. So it's funny, isn't it?
Talk about dragons, Andy.
Did he? Well, okay.
Yeah. He
I've
works
had
with
that
dragons,
happening. So you
which
had
I
some
find
quite
very.
interesting questions then to ask, did you really?
Yes, I did. I've been working on it all week to
Oh,
make sure I was
and
going to get some
that's
good
the
ones
nice
in
thing,
there.
isn't it? You can kind of collate all the information and then, choose the best questions to ask.
Yeah, it was a really great conversation. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for your time today. It has
yeah,
been
cool.
really, really exciting. And there's a couple people that had a couple Andy questions. We'll give them a couple seconds. Anything that we didn't cover
Yeah, it's
real
just,
quick, guys, if you want to ask Andy about the training, about any of the other stuff that we talked about, he was very, very helpful today. He answered all of our tedious questions.
he loves it though, doesn't he? I think that's one of the things for me, really. I try and make this real, so there isn't things you can't ask. I don't feel comfortable, with the concept of hiding anything away. It's like everything should be on the table, and not everything we have answers to, and not everything Chen knows, because he doesn't know everything, even though he thinks he does most of the time. But there are
He did
things.
express that he doesn't know everything.
I
He
did.
did
Well, that's
he
interesting.
did express that.
When I talk to him, he pretends that he knows everything generally, so that's interesting.
So there was another question that somebody had. I remember we answered this question last time, but just to drive things home for somebody that's they wanted to know, when you are talking with Chen, when you have your soul guide, how do you make sure it's actually him versus somebody that may be trying to impersonate him?
Yeah, it's probably the best question in the way that we work, really. So for me, I mean, obviously I've been doing it a long time, so I kind of know his energy. But generally, for most people, it's in meditation. I start going to meditation in the morning, do my own clearing, then ask myself 3 times if I'm sovereign, yes or no. So I check that sovereignty is, provided. So I get 3 yeses. So I know that there's nothing negative connected to me. So I kind of know that I'm good to go. And then I generally put a thought out to command to connect to Chen, working for my highest good and the highest good of humanity. And that's my kind of statement of intent to connect to his energy. And then I hear a voice normally immediately, which is, yeah, it's me sort of thing. And I ask him 3 times, are you from the highest light? Yes or no? So when I get 3 yeses, then there's 2 images that he'll show me, which is the kind of the 2-factor authentication that we've got agreed. If I don't see the right images, I just disconnect immediately and start the whole thing again. But 9 times out of 10, obviously I get to see the pictures. Because occasionally he will test me. He will show me the wrong picture to see if I carry on. Because, obviously we get complacent, of course. And we do it all day, every day. So occasionally I get a wrong picture and I think, well, but it feels like Chen. It sounds like Chen. I'm pretty sure it is. But that picture wasn't the right image. And therefore I stop and go back and go through the process again to then get the right picture and then to see him laughing, saying that there was another test. And,
Chen is really keeping you on your toes.
Well, of course, I mean, it's really important as well, because obviously when we're connecting to clients and clearing them, I need to know I'm working with him and the information's right, basically. So there is, a qualification that has to be right, because of course you can't see the guy because he's not stood in front of me. So I'm just hearing him and connecting to him. So it, there has to be this level of testing that happens. It's just, it can be a bit annoying at times.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And that's the thing, I think, Laura, as well, when you're talking, and like you, when you're talking to your spirit guides and stuff, your soul guides, it can be quite a fun conversation, and parts of it is good and fun. And then there are times that things are a bit more stressful, and times that the things are, very kind of quite deep conversations, and obviously, quite serious conversations. So it's kind of good to get to know your spirit guide, because then you can enjoy the fun parts. And, when things get difficult, you kind of know they've got your back, really. Which is why I was a bit surprised about Sunday, to be honest, because I just assumed that when I put the thought out to Chen to say, can you clear me? Normally it happens immediately, but it didn't on Sunday for quite a time, which wasn't great.
It was a teaching moment, apparently.
Well, it taught Jane more than it taught me, I can tell you that.
He said, I said Jane was the one that had the worst experience of it.
Well, I think Louise mentioned, because I watched the video with Louise and Jono from yesterday, and I think Louise actually said at one point she was concerned about Jono doing this work for that reason, basically. And obviously I had that chat with Jane when I started to do this. Jane was talking to Chen at one point, and he said 2 things you need to know if Andy's going to work with me and we're going to do this stuff. One is his life will be shorter, which came as a bit of a shock to her. And the reason for that is because every time he comes in, obviously my vibration goes up enormously. So the physical body is vibrating faster, and therefore it's going to last less time, basically. Because, you know, if you drive a car at 100 miles an hour, the bits wear out faster. So the same concept with sort of trance work, basically. So that was the first thing. And I said, yeah, I don't particularly care because I don't fear death, so I don't really have a problem. But Jane was a bit more concerned as to how long that timeline was. And then obviously the second thing was, you know, there will be times that, you know, things get a bit heated and a bit negative and a bit difficult. And she needed to accept that, you know, we're working against negative things, and therefore you will probably see and hear negative things. And, you know, but again, from her perspective, it's obviously part of her path because she's chosen to be with me, and therefore she's chosen to be part of that deal, the same as Louise has with Jono. So, you know, it's part of their choice, elected free will choice to do that as well.
Wow. So it's quite wow, you're giving quite a lot of yourself to this, Andy, literally and figuratively.
Well, I don't really care, to be honest, because I know this is what I'm supposed to do. So for me, if it means that your lifespan is cut short by 5 years, there's only 5 years less in a wheelchair and care home that I don't want to be in anyway, so I don't really care.
Amen to that. That's exactly how I feel and why this does not intimidate me one bit.
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
I don't really want to be by the sunny window for 5 years with dribbling and stuff and, you know, all the rest of it. So I'd rather get on with what needs to be done now and, you know, do it that way.
Means we might have less work next time we come back, you know. The more we do now, you know, we're saving ourselves some
or more,
later.
Of course, because you might come back quicker. Therefore, you've effectively got more things to do. So you
got to put it that way.
You could look at it that way. Really.
Depends if we draw those short straws again or not.
Yeah,
we might get a 400-year break like Chen has, you know.
Well, that's the thing, actually. I mean, Jane can talk to Chen, so you know she's telepathic. She doesn't do mediumship things because it's not really her thing, but if push comes to shove, she can actually talk to Chen. So, you know, there is a level of connection there. So if I'm in a difficult place, then she can actually have a conversation with him. So,
wow.
Or of course, she can do the easy thing and just bring John in, which is what tends to happen.
Well, it's a good thing we have teams, and these teams are growing, huh? More backup.
And that's why we need teams, really. That is the whole point, is that in this world, nobody wants to be an isolated island working on their own, because it's kind of not what we're designed to do. And of course, the bigger the teams, the more energy you can pull together, and therefore the more work we can do, and we can do it faster. So what you're orchestrating here, you're bringing together people from all over the world in one space with one kind of view of things, learning and teaching and that kind of thing. And you know, that in itself is worth more than you probably realize, and you know, more than most people probably realize as well. Although I know it's what you do and it's what you're good at doing, but effectively bringing people together is actually one of the hardest things to do, because you've got to find something that everyone's interested in and hold them together as a kind of collective, cohesive union. And that's not easy to do.
No, I imagine it's not.
So that's me
racking up those XP points, Andy.
Yeah, your thumbs up, Laura, for the things that you do. So I just come on, talk to you for an hour, and then I disappear. But you've actually got the hard bit to continue this and hold the group together and keep the conscious awareness up. And obviously, I assume you probably have to eject negative people at some point, because there's always going to be negativity that finds this type of group of people that are obviously very good and tries to bring the energy down, I'm assuming.
Well, honestly, you know, I've gotten better at it. I used to tolerate everybody's bullshit because I had the feeling that if I were to just be really nice and patient, they'll come around eventually, you know. And ironically, it was actually Dolores Cannon that came through Medium and told me to knock it off. Dolores was like, "You're putting up with too much shit." She goes, "You're letting these." She's basically said that they're distractors, that they're coming into our group to distract us and cause arguments and bring in negativity. Yeah. So she basically was like, anybody that starts any shit, you get rid of them. So yeah. I have been a lot less lenient lately when it comes to the amount of people trying to start shit. But I do try to stay patient. I realize that some of these people are only angry because they have, you know, trauma or entity attachments, or, you know, so.
And that's a really good point. It's trying to discern between the people that are consciously good, but maybe misdirected, and people that are actually negative and trying to bring things down. I used to always have this rule, basically, with what Jane and I have it when we've got emails and people we're talking to, is like we call it the no strikes rule, basically. So it's not kind of like one strike and you're out. Like the moment you step out of line or abusive or something else, is, you know, you're kind of blocked, basically. There is no second go.
Come back next
else.
lifetime.
Yeah.
Get your shit sorted out.
Go find someone else to get too annoyed, because, you know, like we're all here trying to do our best, and sometimes our best isn't good enough for some people, which is okay, because, you know, we are human after all, and therefore we are kind of flawed to a certain degree. But, you know, if you're trying to do your best and it's not good enough for some people, then, you know, that's just the way it is, really. And
that's why Louise's message yesterday about boundaries was so important for all of us, really.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, boundaries are a big thing we need to work on sometimes.
Yeah, I think spiritual people tend to be nice people and tend to be very open. You know, we tend to be here for service, yeah? So therefore, we're the easiest people to walk over, aren't we? Because we have the least amount of boundary, because we're kind of trying to help everyone and trying to be good and do the right thing. And of course, you know, negative narcissistic people see that as a weakness and tend to try to then overcome and control, which... yeah. As you get older,
opportunists everywhere. You know, if you give them an opportunity, they'll take it.
Yeah,
no matter if they're living or dead. You know,
yeah. And the dead are worse generally because you can't see them.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the thing. But on the other side of the coin, you know, I mean, you know, SRT work is great because, you know, you get to see so much positivity from people, and, you know, again, it's this 80-20 rule. 80% of it is fantastically good, and there's just 20% of it that isn't really. So it's a great place to work from my perspective, because I don't know any other job that I would get so much from doing the things that we do with. And occasionally you do get zapped, but, you know, it's kind of same with any other job.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Andy. It really is such a joy to talk with you, and you give us so much knowledge and insight. We're very grateful.
No, perfect. It's been good. I've enjoyed it. Well, the bit I've talked to you, I've enjoyed it. Obviously, Chen's enjoyed it more than me, probably.
You're going to enjoy the conversation with Chen, too. Trust me. That was quite an eye-opener. He's amazing. He really is.
Perfect. All right, well, I'll say goodbye.
Thank you, Andy.
We'll talk before we see you anyway, but obviously we'll be looking forward to a session over here, which would be good. And of course, you've got to bring your coat.
Yeah, sorry.
Bring your coat, because it'll be raining non-stop by November, all day, every day.
Yeah, I'm well versed on British weather. I've come prepared.
Yeah, it's generally shit all of the time, really. That's, you know, the deal. Cool. Okay, I'll say goodbye. I'll catch you soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andy. Have a great afternoon.
Yes,
see you soon. Bye-bye. See you guys tomorrow. Love you all. Bye.